Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole load of information, boil it right down, and give you the key insights. Basically a shortcut to getting up to speed.
Yeah, and today we're tackling a really interesting question, I think.
Which is?
What actually happens to the economy when you start paying farmers to be, well, more environmentally friendly?
Right. Using subsidies for green practices.
Exactly. We're diving into a specific study here from Flanders in Belgium. It's part of a bigger project called Pattern. And they used a pretty complex economic model. It's called a CGE model.
CGE.
Computable General Equilibrium. It's basically a way to simulate how all the different bits of an economy, industries, households, government, how they all interact and react to changes, like a new policy.
Oh, yeah.
And they use this model to project way out to 2050, the potential economic effects of paying farmers for more sustainable land use under the CAP.
CAP being the Common Agricultural Policy in Europe.
That's the one, the system of farm subsidies and rules.
Okay, so let's unpack the core idea here. They're looking at what happens if farmers get paid, say, per hectare, to use some of their land for things that help the environment, like biodiversity, soil health, that kind of thing.
Precisely. And the study maps out three potential futures, or narrative storylines, as they call them.
Right.
First, there's the baseline, business as usual. Basically, things carry on as they are now.
No major policy change.
Exactly. Then you've got cautious conservation. In this one, farmers get a subsidy of 1,500 euros per hectare for adopting these green practices.
Okay, a sort of moderate incentive.
Yeah, seen as fairly realistic. And finally, there's rapid regreening. This is much more ambitious, a 5,000 euro per hectare payment.
Wow, that's quite a jump.
It is. So these scenarios represent different levels of environmental ambition, driven by how much money is on the table.
And our mission today, then, is to figure out the economic pluses and minuses of these different paths. What are the trade-offs? What are the benefits for Flanders' economy? And, what should you, the listener, take away if you're interested in this stuff, where environment and economics meet?
That's the plan, understanding those potential outcomes.
Great. Let's start with that middle ground then, cautious conservation. The 1,500 euro per hectare scenario.
Yeah.
What does the study predict happens there? How do farmers react?
Well, at that 1,500 euro level, the model suggests you'd see a meaningful but maybe not overwhelming amount of land shift towards these environmental schemes.
So farmers take it up, but it's not a total revolution.
Kind of, yeah. It's enough to make a difference, but maybe not transform everything overnight. They see it as a decent incentive.
Okay, and here's a key question, I think. If farmers are setting aside land, taking it out of traditional crop production, doesn't that hurt their bottom line, their income?
That's often the big concern, isn't it? But this is where the modeling gets really interesting. It predicts that the 1,500 euro subsidy actually fully compensates the farmers for any potential income lost from, not growing crops on that land.
Fully compensates.
Yes. So overall, farm income is projected to remain stable, maybe even nudge up slightly.
Huh. So the fear that green policies automatically hurt farmers? Maybe not, if the subsidy is right.
It suggests that, yes, well-designed subsidies seem key. They don't have to come at the expense of farmers' livelihoods.
Okay, that's a really important point. What about effects beyond the farm gate?
Well, there are knock-on effects. Because the subsidy basically lowers the farmer's effective production costs, the model predicts crop prices would likely fall a bit.
Lower prices for crops.
Yeah. And basic economics tells us when prices drop, demand usually increases. So you could see higher overall sales volumes for agricultural stuff.
Which means potential benefits for consumers too. Lower food prices, maybe.
That's definitely implied, yes. Consumers could see some positive impact there.
All right, so farmers are okay, consumers might benefit. Yeah. What about other parts of the economy, other industries?
Well, think about industries that use farm products as inputs. Food processing is the obvious one, but also things like bio-based materials.
Okay.
With cheaper agricultural raw materials, their costs go down slightly. And that, in turn, can lead to a marginal increase in their value added.
Value added? That's like the wealth generated by that sector.
Sort of, yeah. It's the value they add to the raw materials. But we're talking small numbers here.
Yeah.
The increase is predicted to be under 1%.
Okay, so a slight positive ripple for manufacturing. Not huge, but it's there.
Exactly.
What about sectors that seem less connected, like services or electricity generation?
There's a bit of subtle rebalancing going on in the model. Because farming becomes relatively more attractive with the subsidy, a little bit of capital investment and labor might shift towards agriculture. This could theoretically lead to slightly higher prices for services or maybe slightly higher costs for capital in the electricity sector, but the model suggests overall demand in those sectors stays pretty stable.
So they adapt.
Yeah, the electricity sector, for example, might just become a bit more efficient in how it uses energy to offset any minor cost increases. It's more about small shifts than major disruption.
So lots of little adjustments here and there. But what's the big picture, the overall impact on Flanders' economy, its GDP, in this cautious conservation world?
This is quite striking. The model predicts that by 2050, Flanders' total GDP would be pretty much unchanged compared to the business-as-usual path.
Really? No negative hit?
Virtually none.
Yeah.
All those small sectoral shifts, the lower prices, the slightly changed investment patterns, they seem to basically balance each other out in the grand scheme of things.
So the argument that going green, even moderately, inevitably tanks the economy. This study doesn't support that, at least for Flanders.
Not at this level of subsidy, no. It suggests you can achieve meaningful environmental gains in agriculture without sacrificing overall economic growth. Minimal disruption seems to be the takeaway.
That's significant. Okay, let's ramp things up. What about the rapid regreening scenario? That much bigger payment, 5,000 euros per hectare, that must change things more dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. With that level of financial incentive, the model predicts a much, much larger share of farmland being dedicated to these environmental practices.
A really significant shift in land use then.
Definitely. The pull of the subsidy is just much stronger.
And again, the farmer income question. With even more land potentially coming out of traditional production, does that huge subsidy still cover the difference? Are farmers still okay financially?
Yes, that's what the model shows. Even though the potential income loss from crops is bigger because more land is involved, you could call it an implicit capital penalty, that much larger 5,000 euro subsidy more than offsets it.
So farmer finances are still secure, maybe even better off.
That's the projection. Financially, they remain well supported in this scenario too.
Okay, now here's a bit I found really counterintuitive in the summary. Even with less land being farmed traditionally, the study projects that actual agricultural production could go up by 2050. How on earth does that work? Less land, more output.
Yeah, it seems paradoxical at first glance, doesn't it?
It does.
The model's logic hinges on adaptation and innovation over the long term. Remember, we're looking out to 2050.
Right, it's not immediate.
Exactly. The idea is, with less land available for conventional crops, farmers face stronger pressure and have the financial cushion from the subsidy to invest in technology and become much more efficient on the land they are still farming.
So like precision agriculture, better yields on the remaining land.
Precisely. Things like precision farming, advanced techniques, maybe different crop rotations, optimizing everything. The model assumes farmers adapt and innovate significantly over those decades.
Okay, that makes more sense. Less land, but smarter farming driving up overall output eventually.
Fascinating. So what does this bigger shift mean for the agricultural sector's economics?
You see what the study calls an amplified agricultural boom. Crop prices fall even further than in the cautious scenario.
Because of the efficiency gains and subsidies.
Yes, and that drives even stronger demand, both domestically and for exports. The result is a projected jump in agricultural value added of around 8% compared to business as usual.
Wow, 8%. That's a really substantial boost for the farming sector itself.
It is. A very positive outcome specifically for agriculture in this scenario.
And what about the ripple effects this time? Manufacturing, services, electricity, still minimal disruption.
Remarkably, yes. The resilience holds. Manufacturing still gets that small benefit from cheaper inputs, again, under 1% increase in value added.
Still under 1%. Yep. And the service and electricity sectors continue to adapt. They might see a slightly larger shift of investment towards the booming farm sector, but they adjust through their own tech and process improvements. Value-added shifts in those sectors also stay below that 1% mark.
So even with this really ambitious greening policy and the big money flowing into farming, the rest of the economy seems to just adjust.
That's what the model suggests. The adjustments happen, but they don't cause major negative waves in other sectors.
Okay, the $1 million or perhaps €1 billion question. What happens to overall GDP for Flanders in this rapid regreening future? Surely that big transfer payment to farmers must drag down overall growth.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But again, surprisingly, no. The model projects that economy-wide GDP growth by 2050 still matches or maybe even slightly exceeds the business-as-usual path.
Exceeds. Even with the massive subsidies. How?
The key reason seems to be the relative size of agriculture in the total Flanders economy. While agriculture sees huge changes and gets a lot of support, it's still only one slice, and not the biggest slice of the whole economic pie.
Ah, the pie analogy again.
Yeah. The other, much larger slices, manufacturing services, remain stable or grow slightly. So even a big change in the agricultural slice doesn't drastically alter the size of the whole pie. The overall economy is robust enough to handle the shift.
Okay, that's quite a powerful message coming out of this modeling. So we've walked through these two potential policy paths. If we step back, what are the main lessons here, the big policy insights we can pull out from this?
The study really highlights 4 key things, I think.
So.
First, pretty straightforward. The size of the subsidy directly drives the scale of the environmental outcome. More money per hectare equals more land shifted to green practices. You get what you pay for, essentially.
Right. The level of ambition is tied to the incentive. Makes sense. What's number 2?
Second, consumers stand to benefit. The subsidies effectively lower production costs, leading to lower food prices. So it's not just about farmers or the environment. It can potentially help household budgets, too.
Good point. Okay, third insight.
Third, the impacts outside agriculture appear minimal. Those feared negative spillovers into other industries or major hits to services, they just don't really materialize in these projections. The economy seems to rebalance relatively smoothly.
So less economic pain than often assumed. And the last one.
The fourth insight is about synergy. The study suggests that if you combine these per hectare payments with other supports, like grants for farmers to adopt precision farming tech.
Helping them make those efficiency gains you mentioned.
Exactly. Doing that could further boost productivity on the land that remains in conventional farming, potentially making the positive outcomes even stronger. It's about pairing the land use incentive with innovation support.
Okay, so putting it all together then. What's the headline conclusion from this deep dive into the Flanders study?
I think the main message is quite clear. It suggests that Flanders, and potentially by extension other similar regions, can significantly ramp up environmentally friendly land use in agriculture without wrecking the overall economy.
So achieving sustainability goals doesn't have to mean sacrificing economic growth.
That's what this model indicates, yes.
Yeah.
Well-designed policies, like these per hectare payments, seem able to shift land use, support farmer incomes, potentially lower food prices, and do all that with minimal disruption elsewhere.
It really does challenge that narrative you sometimes hear, that it's always a stark choice between the environment and the economy. This suggests they can actually work together.
Precisely. It shows a potential pathway where environmental stewardship and economic health aren't mutually exclusive, but can actually be pursued together through smart policy.
Okay, so here's something for you, our listener, to think about. If this modeling holds true for Flanders, how might these ideas apply elsewhere? Could similar approaches work in your region or country, dealing with the same balancing act between feeding people and protecting the planet? What role should government incentives play in driving these big shifts in agriculture? Definitely some food for thought there.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.